Welcome to Clubs Made Meaningful from Sussner. This is a show about building clubs that people love, where strategy, culture, and brand come together to create real belonging. Let's dive in. Every club has a story. The question is whether that story is doing the work it needs to, which is reaching the right people, making the right impression, and then following through once someone actually joins. Private clubs are in an interesting position right now. A lot of them came out of COVID in solid financial shape with healthy waiting lists and strong memberships. But a healthy wait list doesn't mean that your story is working. It might just mean the timing was good. The clubs that build lasting value understand that member value starts before a prospect ever sets foot on property. It starts online, and it starts with how the club tells its story. Today's guest is Ed Heil, owner of StoryTeller Club Marketing and host of Crushing Club Marketing, one of the longest running podcasts in the club industry. Him and his team's work is focused on growing membership and revenue. And what's interesting is how directly that connects to something we explore a lot on this show. A story a club tells shapes how members feel about belonging to it. Those two go together. Today, we're talking about what it takes to attract the right members, what great actually looks like in practice, and what clubs are leaving on the table in the window after someone joins. So doing a little bit of, just digging around on LinkedIn a little bit. According to your LinkedIn, Storyteller's been around for like 21, 22 years now already.
Yeah.
How long in that time frame? When did you start focusing? Did you start focusing on clubs right out of the gates, or did that come in along the way?
As I've sort of come to realize that I almost feel like the club work found us more than we found it. So back in 2005, 6 or whatever, and I was a sportscaster, right? CCO. And so I was like, I went to the Minnesota PGA and I said, if you guys just had highlights of the back nine of the state open, TV stations will run those. Like if you just give them the highlights, like 8 clips of the back nine and bring them to the TV stations, they will run those highlights at night. And I remember John Tillett at the Minnesota PGA was like, really? And I'm like, I will guarantee you they will do that. And so we started to, like in 2006, started to film the last 9 of the state open. I would run home to my basement because I'm just starting out. So I'm working in the basement. And I'd frantically edit these highlights from, on tape. And I would dub them onto beta and I would label them all. I'd write my own shot sheet for all the shots, it's like, whatever it was, each golfer and what hole and what was happening. Because I knew as a sportscaster what they needed, right? And then I would do a loop. I would start in Eden Prairie. I'd go to Fox, WCCO, Fox, KARE 11, CCO, KSTP, and come back. And I'd drop out, I'd hand deliver all these tapes. I mean, think about this. It was 20 years ago. So it was a long time ago. And so the PGA was like, this is awesome. And I did that every year for several years. So in 2007 is when Hazeltine, Mike Schultz, who was then the pro, was like, hey, can you come and talk to us about some of the work you do and how you do it and how you get people noticed? And so that was really the entree into the private club world. And then from there, honestly, Derek, I was sort of avoidant. I just kept looking at the private club space. I'm like, you know what? They don't have money. They don't want to spend money on marketing. It's kind of counter to who they are. It would be fun, but the opportunity seems so much bigger going, B2B. And so that's where we focus. But then, all of a sudden we start working with HubSpot and inbound marketing, and people start reaching out, and I'm doing speaking engagements. And I was like, this is so funny now to think about it, but I'm like, I'm not doing that. I'm not getting paid to do that talk, Then you realize it's really helping people and it's useful and they appreciate it so much. So I'm like, do these things. And one thing led to another. Long-winded.
But you identified a need. It seems like as you talk about it, it was a really natural progression of your skill set, your background, and you identifying a market that would benefit from the marriage of the two, really.
Yeah. And so that, especially early on, that was like that highlights thing was such a like it was so easy. It was honestly, it's like the old line, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. It was like, I could do this stuff every year. They will always, and I think we started to expand to other tournaments and, you got to remember like local was so important back then. And they weren't going to dedicate a camera person to go out to shoot, local golf tournament. But the big thing was Hazeltine in 2012. And you have to go back to remember, coming out of the recession in '08 and '09, and so many clubs were really hurting at that time. And, and we had been doing some work for Hazeltine, mostly just more media relations, PR type, writing press releases and stuff like that. And, they got a new membership director who was interested in what we did, wanted to bring us in. And the one thing I will tell you that kind of changed a lot of things for us was when we implemented HubSpot, the marketing software, with the understanding that when people come to your website as a club, the biggest thing they want to know is how much does it cost? And private clubs, for whatever reason, well, we know why. I mean, it makes sense for some clubs, but they didn't want to put that pricing out there. But we said, do it in exchange for an email address. Back in 2012, this is like, what? No, what? And then automating the follow-up emails and all the rest of that. It was so like, it seemed kind of creepy. And now everyone knows how it works. But in 2012, Hazeltine took a chance. They were actually our very first HubSpot software customer and our very first inbound marketing client. So it was big for us. And, again, just kind of took off that way.
So now Storyteller focuses on content marketing, video production. Obviously, with your background, that's a huge piece of that, digital strategy. And then, as you mentioned, HubSpot. Before I get into that, though, you started a podcast back in
You were one of my first guests.
Yeah, like
my first or second guest.
2017.
18 or
2018.
18, yeah.
First of all, congratulations. I think that puts you into like the top 1% of podcasters.
Yeah.
I did a little, if you ask AI or Google, like what the average podcast, maybe you know this stat, how many episodes does the average podcast last once it gets launched?
I don't know. What is it?
3 episodes.
Really?
3 episodes and a maximum of like 2 to 3 months. So You've been doing how many episodes since 2018?
I don't know. Through the pandemic when everything was so weird, we kind of pulled back too. We're, didn't do a whole lot. We're trying to figure out like, what do people want to talk about right now? But I don't know. I don't know. It's 100. It's hard,
that's a lot.
We started out in the beginning. You may remember, but we started out and we were trying to do one, I think, every week. And then we're like, this isn't sustainable. And then we're like, maybe twice a month. And so anyway, so now we're trying to do it at least. My goal is 2 episodes a month. I don't know. How many are you guys doing?
It's about the same.
Something like that.
About the same every other week. Yeah.
Right. We get busy and it's scheduling and finding people who want to do it. And so anyway.
Well, you're awesome at it. Your news background I'm sure helps, but I just caught recently the one with Joel Livingood, the general manager at for people that don't know, over at Interlochen. Great conversation on culture. I'd recommend everybody go listen to that one. It was really good.
Yeah. Boy, he's done a lot of great work. Pretty impressive, especially at a young age, but very cool.
So with Storyteller specialty now, when a club comes to you, when a club hires you, what's the primary thing that they're usually trying to solve that you help them with?
Yeah. Growing their membership. You mentioned video. It's kind of funny, Derek. Video has been such a, we love producing video. And I always say that at the heart of like one of my real passions is I love that creative, you're a creative. And so that whole idea of putting stuff together like that is really fun, but we've done so little video this year and last year as well. So the last couple of years, we've really been, I wouldn't say it just, our emphasis from a growth perspective has been less on video and more on helping clients, wanted to answer your question directly, grow membership. So while 50% of clubs had wait lists for the last couple of years, now it's under 50. There are 50% that didn't. And I always say, gosh, those 50% that don't, what's happening with them? Like, what is preventing them from, from being one of those clubs? While our video work has gone down, we've built a lot more websites. I mean, that's been probably our biggest growth areas as far as services. And then the other thing that we're starting to do more of, and this is almost going back to my old PR days and media relations days, is communications. So ongoing member communications, which, it's so funny. You see this too, because I know you're close to PCMA and CMAA as well. But when Jackie Singleton started the communications summit, the CMAA communications summit, oh gosh, I mean, the late 2010s, it was fairly small, but now there's such a huge need, in my opinion, for better member communications, not just like in big events or big capital projects, which they're desperately, in my opinion, desperately in need of help there. But just like day-to-day communications, the platforms they're using are crappy and they're outdated and they're not effective at running it, frankly. I mean, clubs have a really hard time. If they don't have a communications staff or person, it's really difficult for them to do a great job at that.
And they understand that because that event, that marketing communications summit, it sells out now. It went from a few people to, I think this last year's event was 125, and they had a wait list. It maxed out. So the
Yeah.
demand from the people that take care of the marketing for the clubs on behalf of the clubs, they're craving that kind of education and information on how to do that job better, how to tell their club story better.
Yeah. And I mean, look, we have a similar goal here in just trying to help clubs become more contemporary, right? And the old days of like the newsletter and clubs are doing a good job of trying to transition. They're learning, but there are so many tools that they have to now manage and so many channels, whether it's social, email, texting, and without a really good process and platform to do that, it's just so hard for them to pull it off. And I think one of the biggest challenges, and look, I sit on the board at our club here in the Detroit area, and it's a lot of times helping board members understand that the way that it used to be done, while charming and sometimes quaint, is not always all that effective when you're trying to reach hundreds of people.
You're trying to help them tell their story through video, through marketing, through communications, new members, prospective members, and existing members as well. In your experience, what's one of the most common gaps between the story the club thinks they should be telling, but especially for those that don't have a wait list, compared to the story that the prospects out there are actually experiencing, the perception,
Right.
how they're thinking about that club because that story hasn't been designed for them. Where's that disconnect usually?
We're both story brand guys. And, I really do think, though, that's kind of at the core of it, which is that I think clubs have historically have become or clubs just are very much about talking about themselves. We have amazing dining facilities. We have a championship golf course. We have in that sort of brochure of amenities that, I think at a time really spoke to people that were like, "Ooh, this looks like a great club," right? Um, but I think the opportunity for clubs today is to really connect with what that prospective member is feeling, thinking, and looking for in their life, and not just even in a private club, but like what there are levels to that, right? But it's like, what's going to fill me up, and so just the approach with the language is, the story is not your patio. The story is not your resort swimming pool. Your story is where your family memories come to life, where you build a legacy for generations, where, it's like those things. So that's where, and it's not like, and I don't know if you feel like this, but it's not like they're far off. Like when you really can, dig a little bit into this and get people thinking, they know what it is. They just need to be led there.
They can't articulate it. They're stuck
Yeah.
on history because that's what they told them was their facilities. What I love is, and I think where you and I are so symbiotic is, and what I love is it's almost the calculation of how do you take the story of our facilities, layer in the story of our history where it's appropriate, to then make that an emotional narrative that, in your perspective, ultimately leads to membership and revenue. Like, it's almost like
Right.
a scientific formula in there that's way more beyond build our great clubhouse and then that'll solve everything.
You just start to look at the story is so important, but then it's like, what's behind the story? Because it's one thing to be able to say we're, hey, um, what families grow together here, whatever, no matter what that story is. But it's like a lot of relationships. If you're broken on the inside, you're going to have a really hard time like keeping members. You're going to have a really hard time attracting because, your reputation gets out in the community. And if people know that you're really dysfunctional, it's like, so there are enough people that say, I don't want to be a part of that. One of my interviews that I thought was so interesting, and it might have been Jim Butler at Club Benchmarking, but it was someone who said, one of the most important things a prospective member can ask is, to questions to better understand their financial position and how decisions are made, because that will inform so much about how the club is run and really understanding governance. Because, gosh, you get in a place where you feel like, you know, I don't know, where it's not really your thing. It's easy to leave. Well, unless you plunk down, 100 grand, it's harder to leave.
Or you own a
Anyway,
home or
you
you
get
own
the
a
idea.
home in a bundled community.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Video is such a awesome tool. You said you're doing a little less this year, but it's still such a dynamic storytelling tool. It's a huge part and expertise of what you guys do. What is it about video that works so well specifically in the private club space? What separates the clubs that use it effectively from the ones that either don't use it at all or, just kind of go through the motions when it comes to video?
Yeah. Well, what we've always been such a fan of is that it can take you somewhere, show you things and introduce you to people. Right. And so, it's that whole thing about how people shop today. And I feel so outdated just saying what I just said, but it's like we all go online to learn. And, it's so obvious. Like 10 years ago, maybe it wasn't obvious, but it's so obvious how we do that today. And if you have a video that tells a story, introduces you to people, if I'm looking at a club, I'm not going to schedule a tour to come out there unless I absolutely 100% know, like I know 10 members and it's going to be great because I always go as a guest. But if I'm new to an area or if I've just seen the club and I don't really know, I'll watch a video. Like I want to find out, do I look like them? Is it somewhere I feel like I'll be happy? What do the facilities look like with people in it? I think that that's what you're looking for is it's the classic, do I see myself in your club story? And if I can't see what that story is, then no, even when you go on a tour, a lot of times you're going on a tour and it's not like you're meeting members, but if I can watch a piece that has interviews with members and I can hear their passion and what they love about the club, I think that means something.
I'm guessing that I'm thinking of Instagram or not maybe the website, but especially social media where those videos can start to where prospects can do part of that research and they can go learn a little bit about the club and they can see. And I don't want to ask for any trade secrets or for you to give away something that people should be hiring you to do and not to just be, doing it themselves. But
Yeah, yeah.
there's got to be some certain types of comments that demonstrate a club's culture. Not only that members would love to see because they love to see themselves, enjoying the club that they love. I suppose with some exceptions or maybe some more exclusive private clubs members don't want to be seen publicly. But for the most part,
Sure.
members, it's a question. Do members love to see themselves? And is that an effective way to show the club's culture to a prospect who, like you said, might be able to see themselves in that group of people?
Yeah. I mean, I think for sure first of all, I have no secrets. Um, but it's kind of funny because no one really likes to be on camera, after interviewing people for Lord knows how long. No one really likes watching themselves. However, I do think that when members understand the the what you're trying to accomplish. I mean, all right, so isn't it funny? It's like no one really likes how they look on camera. They're always there. I sound bad. I look fat, or whatever that is, right? But there are a lot of people who do like to be on camera, right? Just like look at social media. Um, so is it effective? Yeah, I think it's super effective. And the one thing, just so getting into the weeds a little bit, what we know is from a search standpoint. So one of the things that we did early on, going back to Hazeltine in 2012, is we knew that if we could leverage SEO and write blog content that would be found by search engines, that we could increase awareness for. Oh, I got a thumbs up there. That we could increase awareness for the club. So we would write, in the 2010s into the 2020s, blog content that is like optimized for search. So best family clubs in the Twin Cities, best family, whatever the topics were, we'd try to write as many topics about our blogs with certain topics that people might be looking for in searching for a private club. But now with AI in the last several years, what we're looking at is that some are calling it AEO, which is basically AI engine optimization, and trying to get found for get ranked in snippets. So when you search something, your snippet pops up. And so that's one thing we're looking at, but also we think that there's going to be more emphasis in social media for sure. For awareness, if you're trying to get found, the need to be found in social media, we believe, is going to be increasingly important, and having that content in those channels, I think, is going to be really, really important in the years to come here. That's where, I mean, if you look at numbers, people that are using Google, for example, as a search engine has dropped substantially. I mean, it used to be like 90% of all search, or 90+% were going through Google. Now it's like 65%. People are using AI to search. They're using, their social media as a search. So getting found in social media, we think, is really important. And video is obviously a powerful tool in social media.
I'm going to save AI for another conversation, because that's
Right.
that's a whole nother episode.
No doubt.
I'm going to shift a second to, because part of your work is in attracting members, member acquisition, whether it's adding to the wait list or the new members themselves. But a big part of your work is member communication, engaging with the members that are at the club. With the clubs that we work with, I see some clubs do better jobs than others with that onboarding period. There's a difference between attracting a member, even getting a member to join, and then the time frame that it takes to get that member to where they actually feel emotionally like they belong to that club. Once somebody joins a club, puts down that initiation fee, is there a key window time frame that the club has an opportunity to really make sure they're locking in and deepening that connection?
Oh gosh, you may know this. What is the number? It's like you've got, and what is it, the first couple of years where they're most likely to refer another member or something. I can't remember. Maybe it's
Yeah.
months, but it's a relatively defined and short window that a club has to really pull that member in and leverage them to drive more referrals. I mean, you're a member of a private club, and when you join a club, it's like, even when if you've been a member of other clubs, the process, right? But it takes time to really feel like you belong. And so we're a big fan of that onboarding process, and creating resources for clubs so that it makes it really easy for people to know the staff. Like, one of the things I always say is that your staff are new members' first friends. They should be, right? It's like, we walk in and they're like, "Hey, Mr. Sussner, how are you?" And you're like, "Wow, I'm a new member." They know who I am. It means something to you, and you're going to get to know the head pro in the golf shop because you're spending time there. So the faster that the staff can welcome these people, introduce them to other people, the faster that we can get a new member to really understand the policies and the rules, because that's what so many new members are afraid of. It's like, "Oh, I'm going to do something wrong, and I'm going to get a letter, or something's going to tell me," and make that really easy. We just think, whatever, in that first 6 to 12 months, where we're like, make it really easy for them to be a member and to love that place.
from a personal experience, that first 90 days is very intimidating. If you've never, maybe, you were a member at a club in the Twin Cities, now you're a member at a club in Detroit. So you had some expectations, plus you work in the industry, so you kind of know the process. But for that first time club member who's never been a member before, but only has ever had the benefit of being a guest, it's an
Yeah.
intimidating process, which is
Oh,
where,
man. Yeah.
but that's where your work comes in communication. I think all the clubs send so many emails, and for so many different reasons to continue to communicate with our members and keep them engaged. Do you guys follow? I think you're kind of a data guy. Do you follow any metrics around some of the pieces and parts that are the most effective, the types of communications that members actually care about getting?
The clubs, let me put it this way, the clubs that we talk to on a, whether it's a regular basis or first time basis, they're trying to figure out what tools to use. But you just said it. They're sending out a ton of emails and not a lot of so they're like disparate pieces, right? It's like I've got my social media stuff, and so some people might be posting there, and the club's thinking we're sending out emails to tell people about events, but they're not opening or they're not looking. I think that in general, most clubs will tell you they have a fairly high open rate of emails. I mean, north of 50, 60%. But, is that leading to people feeling informed? Do they feel connected? I don't know. Um, so, we're big fans of creating a network, like a hub of information that starts on the website with a blog that has content going out to different channels, content that's being produced in other channels, like in social media or even podcasts that are bringing people back to the website. Um, it's that, what you probably hear too, are people that are, clubs and, in leadership positions are like, I don't know what's going on. We send a lot of emails. We try to communicate. We try to stay informed, help people with this stuff. And I think sometimes it's just a matter of turning that around, saying, all right, you're doing a great job with that, but what is it that they want? What do they need? And taking that step back, maybe even surveying your members to say, hey, what channels are most important to you? I mean, I think it's fairly obvious, which may be why a lot of clubs don't do it. It's like, I know the young people are going to be on social media, but that might not be true. I mean, look at you and I are older. Our wives, I don't know about your wife, but my wife is on Facebook a lot, on Instagram. It's like, isn't that? I mean, the younger people are on TikTok and other places anyway.
Well, I'm even
So
at that age that I don't mind a printed newsletter versus the digital one. It's
exactly.
like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I
Well, I do think, just as a tangent, there's this pushback, and I think what was it? The speaker at Central Florida who was booed talking about AI, right? For the commencement. And, I think that there are a lot of young people who are gonna push back and say, like, analog is actually kinda cool.
yeah, old school. We're gonna
Yeah,
bring back
exactly.
we're gonna bring back business card design.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
With all those channels, I mean, you talk about all the tactical ways to implement all those communications, but it still comes back to the story. It still comes back to making sure that for those to not just share data updates on weather or dining specials this evening, that has to have that underlying foundation that's still communicating in a way that supports that club story. I got to think that that's a huge part of not only for your work to look at all those channels and to figure out which ones are the most effective, but part of them being effective is making sure that you're using the right content and
Right.
that ties back to their story. I got to imagine how hard is it for clubs that are already doing all that communication for you to come in, make sure they're telling the right story, and now fix all that.
It all starts with who you are, right? It all starts, in my mind, all starts with your core values. And in my opinion, I've seen more club core values that are really weak, that are really like they say nothing about who you are. And building from that is so hard because once you know the essence of what that club is and what they stand for, and really it's like it's not about being premier. It's not about necessarily being honest or high integrity. I mean, it's not that those things don't matter, right? But it's like the old things. Those are permission to play values. Those are like, yeah, you better be those things. But what are those things that you're that really define you, that you can latch a brand onto. Because as you know, I mean, it's like then you start to see things, right? Like as a creative, you're like, oh, like things. And then once you have that, everything is tied back to what that why, Simon Sinek would call it your why, what it is. And, I mean, it's hard for any business to really do that. And I think it's hard for clubs. I've done some workshops with clubs in just defining their core values. And they get to a point where it's like, well, isn't that like every club? Doesn't every club kind of say the same thing? And that's where I always feel like if that's where we are, then we got to dig a little bit deeper because there's something else that we need to connect to. But then once you have it, as you know, and you do such a great job with, is like that needs to be in everything you do, not just like on your printed and online materials, but like how you show up. And, you got to feel that brand through everything. Man, that's hard to do.
How often does a club hire you to come in and do a communication strategy? And you're already thinking through a marketing plan and HubSpot and how we can tell a story to help that club acquire new members, get a healthier wait list. And then you realize in that process, they don't have a story.
Right.
You're running, we need to have this workshop. We need to reset our values. I mean, you literally can tie the work that you do, needing the foundation of doing that core value workshop with the result in higher revenues. There's a
Right.
path right there, an ROI
Yeah.
path.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's like if going down to the core values is like going down to the studs. There are so many clubs that don't, either have. I think the biggest thing is that it lacks perceived value. Like why, So when we engage with clubs, one of the first especially for new membership initiatives or communications, we try to really we dig and try to understand who they are and who they believe they are. And not everyone is really is really creative in that way, and so they'll usually tap out at some point, that's well short of where we're trying to get to. But you go, okay, what is this like? And you try to, I think it's one of the hardest things we do, because every piece of content that we create, we want to connect back to it. And if it's like this ambiguous thing, man, it's hard to latch onto that, as you know. I mean, it's really tricky. And that's where, frankly, where we'll have a slow start with a client relationship, because we're trying to produce, whether it's blog content or video content or whatever it is, if they don't have a soul, it's really hard to connect to, They're like, oh, okay. It's like meeting someone at a party that's like great at like cocktail conversation, but there's nothing beyond that, Just tricky.
You've had
right?
what, 8 years of podcast conversations. You've been telling stories for your whole career. StoryTeller's been doing this for 20 years. You've been working with clubs for a long time, thinking about potential club leaders, GMs, marketing directors that may be tuning in. What's something that keeps coming up over and over in all of your conversations? Is there kind of a consistent theme or a through line, something that clubs are consistently taking for granted or underestimating? I don't want to fill in the blank because I've got some like specific areas that I could see that you could speak to, but in general, any place that clubs just consistently are missing out on how they're showing up for their prospective members?
One of the challenges that clubs have is when you get into this capital project thing and trying to build new things, a lot of times what clubs will do is they'll try to recreate what they had. But what they need to be thinking is like, if we're going to update something, we need to think about what the member's going to want in 5 to 10 years. And that's really hard. And so I think that the challenge for a lot of club leaders in general, and look, a lot of GMs are just trying to survive day to day, like operationally, making sure this year is okay and staffing and all that sort of thing. But for boards and GMs to really be thinking, okay, we need a new pool. Like, what should this look like? What's that member going to look like down the road? And then to have the courage to talk to the legacy members and say, we get it. We get that you loved it that way. What we're trying to do is we're trying to protect this club for your grandchildren and making sure that we have something that is going to appeal to them as well. And that's a hard conversation, especially for those who are really stuck in their ways. But I think it's a real challenge. And then the other thing that comes up a lot is just governance. I think that in general, and governance is really tricky, and for a million different reasons. Um, and I'm a big fan of it. You talk to enough consultants, you're like, oh wow, they're making a lot of money in this, consulting around governance. But when you really think about why they do it, I think it's probably money well spent.
The nuance, the emotions. I think back to the work that we've done in the past with business to business clients, corporate clients, retail clients. They're just that those industries and businesses, unless it's an owner operator led organization that you're working with, it just doesn't have the emotional component. The board members, they're members. They're emotionally
Right.
invested. They're financially
Right.
invested. They're probably
Yeah.
successful in their own rights. And I think, part of that, those challenges come from the passion that they bring and the passion that they have, which can also make it really hard to make objective decisions that are the best for the whole and not just what I want, and the best for the future and not just what we're doing today. So, yeah,
Yeah.
spot on.
And it's interesting, and I learned so much in my conversations, as I'm sure you do as well. And there really needs to be a commitment from club leaders to actively recruit members to sit in board positions that are really concerned and interested in the betterment of the club and not just the things that they want to have done. And that's not always the case, I mean, where you really have to just actively recruit and actively think about who is going to help us, get to where we want to go. And then I think the next generation, one of the challenge is going to be really getting people to want to be that involved, right? To have that join a club so that, that's actually something I'm looking forward to being, part of membership. But anyway.
Awesome. Last question. With something we haven't quite touched on yet, if a GM or a board member is listening to this today and they have a sense that their club story could be working harder to help their club in attracting members, what's one thing you would advise them to do first?
Understand who you are. Like, what is it about your club that, like, what's the essence of your story, I had this just a really quick anecdote around that, and because it's hard. Sometimes it's really hard because people get so caught up in the weeds of their club, you know? And so, I had this conversation with, an owner, privately owned club, actually, and we were working on some stuff, and I said, "Can you just tell me, like, what is when you envision, like, what it feels like to be at your club? Like, just tell me." Like, he was having a really hard time articulating, but and I said, "What does it feel like?" And he just man, he really struggled, and he's like, and just talking. So finally, I said, um, "You're a member at," you know, it was actually Whisper Rock in Scotts. I said, "Well, you're a member at Whisper Rock, right?" I said, "If your club was like Whisper Rock, is that close to how you'd want to feel?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Okay, describe Whisper Rock to me." And man, he went on, and it was great. It was like, "Okay, great. So if we can do that, if that's what you want people to feel, that and that's it, like, would that make you happy?" And he's like, "Absolutely." So that's probably it though. It's like maybe, when you're trying to really figure out what's at the core of your club or what the vision or, what you envision this being, really try to tap into that, but look at other ways and maybe other clubs that you aspire to be like and describe that story. The story, that perceived story even, because it's always different on the inside.
And like you said earlier, which is kind of one of my favorite takeaways so far from today's conversation, is it's already there. That person's just
Yeah.
having a hard time articulating it. He knows it, he feels it. Your job is to help him articulate it and put it into a narrative so that then you can help them tell that story.
Yeah, it's hard. And you know what? And to your point, maybe they can't. Maybe that person is not really, but maybe there's someone else who knows it well who can articulate. You know what I mean? But yeah, that's absolutely right. That's
This is
my belief, at least. Yeah.
awesome. Ed Heil, owner of Storyteller Club Marketing, host of the Crushing Club Marketing podcast, which everybody should check out. Thanks for joining me today. I appreciate the conversation.
Thanks, Derek. It's a lot of fun.
The clubs building lasting memberships aren't just telling better stories to get people in the door. They're telling better stories to make people feel like they made the right call. Storyteller's work is proof that revenue and belonging aren't competing goals. When the story is right, both follow. If today's episode resonated with you, please share it with someone in your club world. And if you haven't already done so, sign up for Clubs Made Meaningful Insights at clubsmademeaningful.com. Original frameworks and ideas on identity, belonging, and member experience delivered to your inbox weekly. Thanks again for listening. At Sussner, we help private clubs build brands that create belonging. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone in your club world. And until next time, let's create something worth celebrating.